I have to start again. We're now recording. No, it's okay. You always miss the best bit before I forget. Okay, so the first line in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5 is, all this happened more or less. And that's history, isn't it? It happened more or less. History, for example, can only be an approximate story of what happened, or actually what might have happened. But that is also in science, philosophy, art. It's all approximate, and this is part of a principle that I wrote, and it's called the dissonance, fragmentation, and approximation principle. And this principle points to aspects of time and of change. So I take an epistemological view of the universe. So I maintain that that knowledge is everything. It's all down to knowledge. Without knowledge, there isn't anything. Okay, so I take a stand against the certainty of knowledge, even though I say that knowledge is everything. Okay, despite the seeming thrust, the urge of people towards the solid, the known, and the perfection of everything. People want to be certain. That's what it's all about. And I say this is problematic because there is no certainty. Okay, so when we look at this in science, which people who are not scientists and some scientists tell us that science is exact, and it tells us what there is, and it's certain. And I will show in the way that I can that it isn't. Okay, so in anything that changes part of a continuum must be temporary, i.e. it must be approximate. Carl Sagan said, the universe is not required to be in perfect harmony with human ambition. So we do want things to be in harmony. And this is the trouble. We want things to be in harmony. When we find they aren't, we're not happy. As you know, those who've been with me for quite a while, for me, time is a basic element of what we like to call reality, the basic element. And since time is change, or change is the result of time, reality is approximate. Reality is approximate. Therefore, you have to ask, what is reality if it's approximate? This is a controversial thing to say, and a few of the things I say now and again are controversial, in case you haven't noticed. A reality being approximate, there is a dichotomy here. Okay, as John Stuart Mill put it, there is no such thing as absolute certainty, but there is assurance sufficient for human life. So we all want to be sure that there is free will. We all know that there's now. We all know that there's truth, and there are facts. Well, you can see from what Carl Sagan said, he's not so sure about that. And as you know, I'm not sure about it at all. 1 second. Addy, you don't have your, Addy, Alex, and Sunny, you do not have your videos on, and I would really like that. Thank you very much. Okay, the repercussions of approximation being everything and everything being approximate is enormous. I need only mention truth, i.e. truth is approximate, for most of you to leap at me. Lucky that we're on the Zoom and you can't. But when I say that approximation is everything, I could also say that knowledge is everything, which I do. Yet I claim also that knowledge is approximate. So here we get to a contradiction. The first or the fifth of the evening. I haven't counted yet. So if knowledge is everything, there is a contradiction. Can everything we know be approximate? If everything we know is approximate, then it isn't everything, since we need something to not be approximate with which to contrast it. If everything we know isn't approximate, then there are things that are approximate. Okay. It also means that nobody is right about everything and nobody is right about anything. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Is there 100% right about anything? No, since everything is approximate. And up to and including Newton, things were not approximate. We knew about a definite world. We knew how things work. We knew that the world works on definite principles. And then came Einstein and upset the world. So, for example, for Newton, time was the same all over the universe. There was one time, and everything worked according to that. Einstein came along and said, no, it isn't. Time is different depending on how fast you go, location, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to get across now is that I see the big picture as the struggle for reality against the fact that nothing is as it seems. It is, in fact, harmony versus chaos. So it's dissonance, fragmentation, and the result being approximation. So what do we do with all this? We're in a bit of a mess, right? Which is my middle name. So do we now just give up and stop researching? I mean, if everything is approximate, what are we looking for? We're looking for more approximation? Actually, we are. No, because approximation seems to be the only reality, is approximation. So what we need to do is we have to live with it. Just as those into quantum mechanics are learning to live with probabilities, not absolutes. Eventually, you get used to things being probable, which is weird, but that's what we might have to do. That's a complete different way of looking at the world. Quantum physics makes predictions to 14 decimal places. It might be more by the time I wrote this, I don't know, which makes it the most accurate of all mathematical physical theories. But it's still approximate. It's still only 14 decimal places. Einstein believed in a fundamentally deterministic universe. So in his view, a probabilistic theory was necessarily incomplete and unfinished. He didn't like it, basically. So we continue in the knowledge that things are not as they seem, and in the hope that eventually there will be as we would like them to be. But maybe they won't be. Maybe this is it. Maybe things are not certain because we ourselves are mixed up. Why should the world be simple and harmonious when we ourselves aren't? An example is the probability of the future. I think I've done this three or four times, and I still haven't convinced you. I want to try again. Okay. So probability of the future, which we hate because of free will. After all, if we've got free will, we do not want uncertainty. We want to make sure that what we choose happens. Okay, so the probability of the future can be explained by the probability of the past, which are memories. And the future is based on our past. If our past is probable, and we can see from false memories that our past is probable, might not be as we think it is. In fact, most of us don't agree on the past that we've been through. History books certainly do not agree on what the past was. If we base our future on an uncertain past, then the future would be uncertain as well. Okay, so so basically we can say that the future is unfinished because we never get to the future. We never get to the future. We always know what's going to happen until it doesn't happen. Then we saw it didn't happen. And when we get to the future, we say it did happen, but we only know that because it did happen. But before that, we never know. And there is a reason. It's because it's based on an uncertain past. Okay, so the future is approximate. Since it's based on an approximate past, the future can only be approximate because we can never say what will be, only what might be. The future is a mass of probabilities. Now let's look at simultaneity. Two things cannot occur at the same time. The two exactly the same things can only happen when they are approximate. If two things are exactly the same, then they are the same thing. A equals A makes no sense because A is A. It's a point of logic that A equals A, but it's not a point of logic, it's a matter of time. If A is the same as A, there are no two A's, there's only one A. Okay, so now we come to this measurement, the problem of measurement, okay, which is, it turns out as the most difficult question in physics today. All attempts so far have failed. They failed in philosophy, they failed in science. I'm going to go through a little bit of science. I'm not a scientist, so, but I want to do that to show you how close philosophy and science is, because one leans on the other. They both should lead to the same place approximately. So if we talk now about the uncertainty principle, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which scientists know is a theory instituted within quantum mechanics and states that the exact position and the exact speed, the velocity of an object can never be simultaneously known. Well, that is hugely problematic, hugely. During Newton, there was no problem, but there is now a problem because we can't measure things because one of the factors we do not know. So no aspect of experimental physics can be stated without time. And no aspect of time can be defined meaningfully in the absence of a human observer, an intelligent system determined to organize the changes of the universe into larger patterns that therefore enable persistence over dissipation. I think that there is a huge misstep in science to adopt the faith of the infinite and absolute as the reality under a changing universe. The exact opposite appears to be true. A universe of finite information strives constantly to reach limits that appear to make the perfection of infinite resources real. Perhaps there's a survival instinct, adjusting to approximation as if it is absolute. What I'm saying all the time is perhaps there is no absolute. Perhaps we should get used to it. It's a horrible thought. Just imagine there's no absolute, but maybe that is what is happening. And when I say is happening, of course, I don't mean is happening. I mean, it's happening approximately. So if we now move back a little bit to Plato believed in perfect forms, that behind everything there is perfection, the perfect forms. And I suppose you know the allegory of Plato's cave, where everything was a copy of the real thing. Do you want me to go through it, or you'll know it?
You can go through it if you like, but I think we have an approximate knowledge of it.
Okay, fair enough. So I can, good, thank you. That saves me a few minutes. because I have to finish within a certain time. Otherwise, you know. So, by the way, those of you who haven't been here before, I'm speaking for a very, very short time, and then you're going to go for it. So I've got to do this quite fast. So in Plato's cave, everything was a copy of the real thing. It was never found. The real thing was never found, even by the one person who escaped. He went to the sunshine, was blinded by the sun, and came back again, because you can't see the real thing. And there are shadows of that in Kant, of course, who talked about the thing in itself. We can never see it, but we must take his word of what was, in my humble opinion, speculation. Science supposedly tells us of what there is. The search for reality assumes that there is reality around, and that it's a matter of time till we find it. And there is this funny thing that physicists are looking for, which is the theory of everything. Now, that is a very dodgy thing to even talk about, because it assumes, the theory of everything assumes that there is an answer for everything, and that there is everything. There is everything. Well, if there's everything, then it can't be approximate. And if it's approximate, there can't be everything. It's just as crazy as looking for nothing, basically. There are things like Wittgenstein, for example, said that we do not need to interpret meaning. We do not need to interpret language. It should be there. Just let me give one short example. We would all say that when we see a photograph, here it is, you can't deny it, the photograph is reality. But is it? I can assure you, if we look at the same photograph of people we know, we will see different things in the photograph. I've mentioned this before. If we see, let's say, a group photograph, and we know that one of the people that we're looking at subsequently died, we do not look at that photograph as it is. We see something different. That person who is now dead, but somebody who looks at the same photograph won't see it in the same way, and that is approximation. So, of course, I have to mention God while I'm here. Why not? Only God is perfect. I said that in inverted commas. Okay, only God is perfect, complete, and unchanging. So not approximate. So maybe we found something that's not approximate. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is God who's not approximate. He's the real thing. But on the other hand, our ideas about God can only be approximate, making our knowledge of God approximate. And as I said, that knowledge is all. That, and we cannot deny that we have knowledge. The way we think about something that's perfect is makes the perfect thing not perfect. So if God is beyond our knowledge, we have no way of saying what God is, and hence cannot say that God is perfect. As I mentioned before, history is per se approximate. But history is written by writers, told by tellers, and repeated by people. History begins where you want it to begin. When did the conquering begin? You go back and you look at ruins, and this one conquered that one, and that one conquered that. How far do you go back? It's all approximate, because one thing happened after another. When you look back, you're looking back into the past, and where do you decide that history has begun at that particular place? So again, the problem of history is we don't know what happened in the past, only approximately. Therefore, we can't learn from history, although most professions are based on learning from the past. By the way, David Attenborough, in a new TV show about dinosaurs, etc., tells us how a T-Rex dinosaur made moaning sounds with his jaw closed during mating. Now, with all due respect to David Attenborough, etc., how could he possibly know what sound a dinosaur made? I mean, I'm so stunned by this knowledge that we're given. That cannot be true. I mean, how is that possible? Okay, we've got here, I think we should have two lawyers here. I can't see somebody. Is there somebody here from Sweden? No, he said he's going to come. Okay, let me talk about the law. This is especially for you, Bill. you're the representative of lawyers at the moment, unless somebody else here. Look, law is all about interpretation and precedence. If there's one thing that is approximate, it must be the law. If it weren't, there would be no need for judges or juries, because there it is. Here's the written word. That's the way it is, and that's it. But it isn't, because lawyers and judges are forever arguing what the law really says. What was actually written? When? What did it mean at the time? At the time. Just for a second, I can talk about the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution that says, there's a big thing about this, that citizens' right to bear arms, but that's not the whole story. It was for a militia to defend the laws. And just let me tell you that William Daniels writes a very, very nice blog. It's called Philosophical Cramps. If any of you are interested, you should look it up. It's very, very nice, short, very, very nice thing he writes. And a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember exactly when, he wrote about the problem of the Second Amendment, which I found very, very useful. I began to understand things. And how are we doing? I've only got a couple of minutes, and I leave it all to you. Just a couple of things about maths, where everybody seems to think is perfect. It's not approximate, but maths is approximate. There are axioms, of course, which is an assumption that is self-explanatory and widely accepted as true, without requiring a proof. So, for example, a line can be drawn from a point to any other point. The probability of an event is a real number greater than or equal to 0. If set X and set Y have the same elements, then X is Y. To which I say, no, it's not. Because if they're the same, they are the same. There are no two the sames. And there's something else which is interesting, that A plus B equals B plus A. But as far as I understand, it does not work in quantum physics. It doesn't work that way. So
here it's not A plus B, it's a product of A and B, not necessarily is a product of B and A in quantum physics.
Thank you very much. Can I please finish my thing, and then you come in? Otherwise, we're all going to come in. Thank you. You can mention that again. And I'm very keen to be. Hi there, Maurice. Good to see you. I am always ready to be corrected, even when I'm right. No, that was a joke. Sorry. At the last meeting, I said that time is a disturbance of what would be the status quo, the natural system. The disturbance is change, the result of which is continuous and continual, and therefore approximate. Anything that moves must be approximate compared to anything it moves through. So let's look at the possible and the impossible. It's interesting that the possible can only be approximate, whereas the impossible is not approximate. See if I got this right. Why does that impossible seem to be exact? Only because it is unknowable, and hence we can't imagine it. If we could, it would be possible. Prove me wrong. Okay, Hegel argued that to think of an unknowable is already to bring it within the sphere of what is known. So I want to finish off by saying the most important part, I've done my half an hour, all is knowledge. If all knowledge is approximate, everything is approximate. And we don't know what we don't know. That means that we know that we don't know some things. Therefore, we know that we don't know, yet act as though we do know. So we spend our lives under the shadow of uncertainty, looking for what we know we can't know. This is the ultimate circularity of hell, as far as I'm concerned, much worse than Dante's. Okay, so we all look for closure. We all want things to be fine and good. And here I am ruining your Sundays by telling you that don't worry about it, or do worry about it, because nothing is definite. Everything is up in the air, and let's get used to it. Okay, because what we are lost. We're trying to find our way. We're trying to find meaning. So we've got free will, we've got telepathy, we've got astrology, we've got psychiatrists, we've got Prozac, etc., etc. But I'm not sure we need these things if we perhaps think about the more and more and more we find that is approximate, and that's the way science is going. We find patterns because that's what humans do, but it doesn't mean that the patterns we find mean anything other than what we think they mean. Basically, we find what we are looking for. And what I found was not what you found. What I found was approximation, which is pretty dodgy. Anyway, I will end my thing here. Open up. I see people have got their hands up already. So, okay, well, we'll start with Alan. Thank you very much. You do have your hand up, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Ron. I'm going to take a step back from what I would call singularities here. We could talk about approximate, and we can talk about there not being certain knowledge, etc. And this strikes me as a kind of singularity. Yes, our world does have singularities, and those singularities make for the structure of our world. And so my thoughts on approximate are these. I'd like to take to contrast a kind of convergent view of approximate and divergent view of approximate. For the convergent view of approximate, I would look at, for example, Heinrich Hertz's principles of mechanics. Hertz's principles of mechanics was very influential in influencing Wittgenstein, for example. Wittgenstein's Tractatus was essentially Hertz's principles of mechanics. What did Hertz do in his principles of mechanics? Well, he defined a couple of principles by which you might make a good model. One principle was be logically permissible, meaning that it didn't lead to contradictions. Another principle was accuracy. In other words, whatever we say about something, if in our verbal description, if something rises, the object also rises, etc. There's a morphism there. He also said that things should be appropriate. And by appropriate, what he meant was that things should be simple, but not too simple, a kind of Occam's razor type of criteria. At any rate, Hertz was very much off in another world with regard to taking off on Newton's idea of force. And he came up with a very simple, what he described as a perspicuous principle by which you can do mechanics. And so that's on the convergent side. On the divergent side, I would suggest looking at Peter Galliston's Image and Logic. It's a 950-page tome on the history of particle physics in the 20th century. At the end of it, he comes up with a notion of trading zones. He philosophizes a bit. And these trading zones are kind of venues of communication. When you do big physics, you involve a lot of people, maybe 1,000 people. Those 1,000 people have different vernaculars. They don't communicate with each other. And so in order to communicate, they come up with a pidgin language, and they communicate in this pidgin language. And the Galliston maintains that this is a mutator. This is a way of introducing new ideas in physics, because these people who are working together can't really communicate in their native language. They communicate in this pidgin language, and they come up, and the end result is a production of new ideas. So I don't know. Recently, I read Alan Sokol's what is it called? I forgot the name of it. Anyway, it's a criticism of postmodernity, and
Yes, he wrote a little, yeah.
And he goes through all kinds of ideas that postmodern philosophers have come up with using physics type vernacular that is completely BS. Anyway, I'll stop.
The problem with coming up a language that only a few people understand is that they're not giving new knowledge to many people, and it's a huge problem. The only way we do get to understand each other is by using a language that is approximate enough for us to understand. As soon as your friends started their own jargon, they went into their own world, and it just left us behind. So I don't see the advantage of eventually that language will become approximate as well, because other people won't understand and they won't understand. They'll have their own dialect of that particular language, and the whole thing will come apart. It happened with Esperanto, for example. Language is a human thing. The only point, I'm sorry, I want to take up time. The only thing I want to say is that approximation is exactly the point of how language does work. It's approximate. It's approximate, and we understand each other. Making it not approximate ruins the whole point of language. But okay, we're gonna come back to that. But thank you very much, Alan. Very nice. Next is Morris.
First of all, I want to apologize to all of you, and particularly to Ron. I missed the first 20 minutes of the Pearls of Wisdom. True. And I hope I didn't miss anything very essential in order to be able to talk about approximation. But you mentioned, Ron, you mentioned David Attenborough and a dinosaur or whatever it was, making this noise. And it just seems to me that, isn't that the same as a tree falling in the forest? No, there was nobody there to hear it. So it obviously didn't make that noise, did it? If nobody heard it.
Correct.
But that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say is something quite different. That is, first of all, there are very few things which I see as being not approximate. and tell me I'm wrong, but I see life and death as being very much not approximate. Sometimes it's difficult to know whether somebody is alive or dead, but that's only because of our difficulty in diagnosing where they are in the continuum of life. But it's very clear that there is an interface between life and death, even though each of us will not be aware of that interface. We're aware of it with in other people, and that is not approximate. That's very definite. I could also say the same thing about the beginning of life, except that it's much more difficult to say exactly where that point is. And you mentioned Hegel earlier on. Well, he's definitely dead. I mean, that's not approximate. He's not approximately dead. He's exactly dead. One thing, the next thing I wanted to say, I mentioned interface, and I can see an interface between the past and the future. Now, I mean, that point in time, when we discuss time, and many times we discuss time, there's that elusive moment of now. But that is exactly where we are, isn't it? No. This is not approximate. That interface between the past and the future is a very, very exact place. We can't identify it clearly. We can't say, we can't really describe it very well or at all. But each of us at this moment know that we are in that place, and it's exactly where we are. Or am I approximately wrong?
You are completely approximately wrong. Either you slept through the last month's talk, or you forgot what I wrote in my nothing book, or both.
Both of those are true.
So,
approximately, anyway.
How can I possibly answer a thing like you just said? Tell me when now started. I rest my case. You mean that's now? It's gone. Anyway, we went through this last week.
But when it was there, it was exact.
Exactly, it was there. It was the past. I agree. So now it's never here. It's the past. I agree. Second thing is the thing about being alive and dead. I did mention that knowledge is everything. Now Hegel does not know that he's dead. We do.
Well, you assume he doesn't know he's dead.
Well, in that case, I rest my case doubly. Then it's definitely approximate. Make up your mind. You want to attack me or you don't want to attack me?
I want to attack you. I don't want to attack you. I want to attack you.
I'm going to come back to you because yes, I'm definitely going to come back to you. Okay. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I didn't agree with a single word of it, but it's very interesting anyway. But I'm
very happy to hear that.
I know you are. And now, okay. And thank you very much. Anton.
Yeah, well, I actually don't have to. I don't have an attack. If you're expecting one, there is one thing I can say that I tend to not attack. I don't attack. I'm one of the. Well, I mean, I don't know. Actually, I was about to say something I don't think is relevant, but I do think I'll even start out with actually what I agree with. It does seem that oftentimes what we're calling facts as people, or what we're calling truth, is approximate. So like, it's kind of an interesting concept too. So I was thinking, rather than saying facts, I mean, at least in certain cases, I think approximate facts, close enough to being true. And for me, that's, if that is something that we can actually figure out, that's fine. That's I guess maybe one difference between what you're saying, Ron, and the way that I see it. But I do think that too often, I mean, I will say this about myself as well. We make assumptions, and we have certainty, and those are just assumptions. I can make a list of assumptions about my life. It doesn't prove that it's true. It doesn't mean, and not like we have to prove everything that we experience is, but I do think that certainty is a problem. I'll say, just as a concept. However, like you were talking, Ron, about the unknown and possibly even the unknowable. I think that it can be fun, or at least interesting. So like, even though I've definitely had moments of, oh man, what if I can't figure this out, or what if life can't be figured out? Like, to me, part of the point is that that's why I like talking about certain philosophical things or having conversations with people, is it's exploring or discovering the unknown and possibly even unknowable. So those are some thoughts that I have. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. I think that's why we meet here, and we discuss things that we might know, we might want to know, we want to know why we don't know, and what people here from many countries and different ages, and it's quite wonderful that we've got this thing called Zoom, and that we can get together and we can hear what other people have to say, which I think and we enjoy exploring stuff we don't know, right? I think we enjoy that, otherwise we wouldn't be here, I think. So thank you very much, Anton. Yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you. I want to, Ron, actually grab Plato. You mentioned Plato, and it ignited my studies of him, and I think that he would, not agree with you on your explanation why everything is approximate. I think he would, if he would have spoken in terms of approximation. So he would say that, yes, in our world, in our physical material world, it is definitely approximate. We can definitely not know anything, but we do always strive to something, that we do have within ourselves some sort of an ideal, some sort of something we would like to strive for. And Plato called it, he would say, a form. And he would say that there's a realm of form, a reality, the actual reality, a true reality, a certain absolute reality of forms, which could serve as guides to us. And these forms are like templates, are like it's like a blueprint, and it's actually I would say as a practical tool to be guided towards an ideal world, towards something that is good, something towards a better world. And for him, of course, for Plato, the guide, the way, the system, the way of thought that can be promoted towards that is, of course, by philosophy. The philosopher is the one who tries to analyze, who searches for the truth, who wants to get and try to reach the form, truth of any concept or anything. That would be the philosopher. And Plato was a rationalist, so for him everything was a priori, innate. So Plato, he actually thought, I think he assumed, that the material world is very approximate, it's very imprecise, but within us, within the man, woman, but for him it was still only man, there is an innate form, a real innate form, which our spirit or soul is recalling, not new, but recalling the study of the world. So for him, it would be searching for an ideal, searching for a realm, something that is real, even though we are approximate, is actually the most practical tool we have. So and so I think, just to conclude, so I think he would agree it is approximate. This material world is very difficult to live in. It's complex, but we do have a template, some ideals, some good whatever it is, some ideal goodness that should lead us to what we want to do. And it can be anything, of course, but I think also history perhaps shows that concepts have actually progressed. So everything is approximate, but there is some sort of a positive shift in if it's human rights, if it's in thought, if it's in equality. Not completely, still really approximate, but perhaps it is, we are still in that way. It's not all doomed. So that's my take on that.
Thank you very much. So are you saying that we are progressing, that things are getting better because somewhere there's the template? Yeah, I mean, is it happening?
Well, I think history and historians would agree that life is much better nowadays than 100 and 200 years ago. People live longer, people had their kids in most countries, of course, are not dying in a young age. You have medicine, there's more freedom, there's no slavery, you're freer. I mean, you have more freedom in the world to walk around. People are not just gonna kill you, at least without some sort of punishment. So yes, it's, I think, and yeah, human rights, I think, has progressed, basically, even though there are parts in the world that are declining sometimes. And abolishing laws that were a sign of progression and now are not. But I think, yeah, slavery is not something that in most people, in most Western countries, democratic countries, agree with.
True.
Would have, so.
That's true, but that's the West. I'm not sure what's happening in Africa if there's no slavery, etc., etc. I'm not that sure, but okay, fair enough.
And we're talking about, yeah, where progressive thought is more developed and is able to develop if you live in a war-stricken area. So it's a bit more difficult to sit down and philosophize about human rights. So if you're starving, it is also not exactly, it's not a situation where you can sit down and philosophize and think about human rights. It's so, yeah.
Okay,
there the problems are unfortunately different.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you very much. Olga, hi, good to see you.
Hi, could I answer Debbie first before I ask you a question?
Of course, the stage is all yours.
It's of course for us, for me, for you, yes, but for girls who come from, for example, from Ukraine or Russia or Africa, and right now like serving as a sex slave in New York or London or somewhere, it's different. And for Chinese guy who is now on bicycle going around and bringing us pizza because we cannot cook by ourselves because we have rights, we're so free, it's also different. So it's all approximate. So, so I would like to tell you, Ron, that from my point of view, what all subjects that you try to talk about, it's really important. But usually you have very comprehensive analysis of what you're talking about. Although after that, it's like left in the air because, okay, so it's approximate. So what to do with it? It probably, for example, it's not a suggestion or something. For example, we could say there is levels of approximation. This is 1 level, this is 0 level. And even in math and physics, we have these probabilities. And they said this probability of this event dead. Probability of this event is dead. Probability of this person is dead is this. Probability of this person get killed or being sex slave is this. And probability of being this person is being absolutely free is also this. So it's probably somehow could solve some kind of and put some events on levels of approximation. And for example, last time when we talked about time, Roland Mann, he is today again, he was saying, from my point of view, unfortunately my connection, I lost connection by the end, and I could not, I was not able to listen everything, but I heard what he said, and it was very interesting what he said. He was saying how for example, athlete who is expecting what he is going to do with his ball is how he's anticipating a future and how approximate and how precise it could be. And in most cases, it's very precise. He hit the ball at this ball at particular this place when it should be hit. So it's somehow in his mind there is this approximation of the future, which became very precise in the moment that he hit the ball. And in other events, we could talk about something like this. And I would like to, so if you talk about levels of approximation, I don't know if it solves this problem or won't solve, but it definitely gives some orientation for us. So I would like to ask you, a question. So the question is, how approximate is your name?
My name?
Yes.
Okay. You want an answer, I presume?
Yes, of course.
Oh dear. Look, it depends how you pronounce it. No, I can, okay. No, okay. I can tell you, since you asked, I am called Ron, Ronald, and Ronnie. Now, those are three certain types of people call me by those names, and I have to remember, by the way, who calls me what. It's a good question, but I have thought about it. I know that people who write to me as Ronald, I have to remember whether to reply Ronald. It's easy, I can see. Do I, though, then do Ron to show them that I am being more friendly and you can call me Ron, right? And I do think of these things. I do. And I think you write to Ronald, and I keep on replying Ron to you. So there you have it. Now you know the secret. So but I don't remember who calls me what. My family call me Ronnie, right? And my good friends call me Ron. But other people, when it's official, I'm Ronald, and I have to remember that. So when you ask me how perfect or not approximate is my name, there you have the answer. You asked the wrong person.
No, it's about levels of approximation and give your name different meaning. it's give your name different meaning. But if you put your differently in some kind of documents, for example, here in the United States, if you put in your tax form something different, it will get you in huge trouble. So there is this level of approximation that you have to submit to something and consider yourself free from this, or be approximate, or you have to be very certain in some cases. And so it's again, it's important topic. And the question is, for me, for example, it's how to deal with it. Not so much is approximate or not approximate, how to deal with it, what we could do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, my point was a very, very general one, was that we are so used to strive for perfection, etc. And I want to put another way of looking at it. Perhaps we're driving ourselves crazy by this striving for things to be perfect. I'm saying perhaps they're not. Perhaps there's an approximation, and we can see it with in physics, that it is accepted that there are probabilities, and that the future is a lot of probabilities. And even Roland's thing about catching the ball, when you catch that ball at that point, it's not the future, it's the past. I caught it. It's the past. You never know until that moment whether you're going to catch the ball. And if you don't catch it, then you didn't catch it. The future looked certain until you miss. So my only point was, perhaps we should think about coping with approximation, perhaps, because that's the way science seems to be going. So it just struck me. I do think that the search for harmony causes a lot of problems. I'm not a psychologist, but I feel that all these books that are coming out about harmony and self-help and being one with the world. No, why should we be one with the world? Maybe we shouldn't be one with the world. Maybe we're okay without not being one with the world. Maybe I'm happy things being approximate. I would like to know which name to use. Yes, but it's all approximate. I mean, if somebody decided to call me Rob, then and kept on calling me Rob, then I would either say, stop calling me Rob, or I would answer him and say, okay, I'm Rob. Fair enough. For you, I'm Rob. So I learned to live with it. I think that was the main point that I made, that approximation might mean not such a bad thing. That's all. Thank you very much, Olga. Kari, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that, but I do think that there is a difference between reality and our experience of reality. Because I think that to say that there is no definite basis, I don't think we're in a position to say that, because we can only ever experience the subjective, the approximate. And so, yeah, I agree with that. But to say that there is no objective and that everything is just approximate, well, everything as it relates to us is approximate, yes. But to say that everything in and of itself is approximate, I think is another extrapolation, entirely. So I do agree that, yes, life is approximate, and we live in an approximation of reality, because that real thing can never really get to us, because we only can experience it as an approximation of itself. But to then say that reality is itself approximate, I can only say that, and like I said, I can only say that as it relates to us. I cannot say that in and of itself.
What is there in the world apart from us? Where do you see reality if you never, ever, ever, ever see it and know that it's approximate, where would you get to the point there is reality? I can't see it. I never can. Nobody can ever see it, but it exists. Where does it exist and for whom?
That is that's the same, like speaking of the last time we talked, the same thing we talked about with time. And I always say that, like I said, that does the past create itself? Does something have to happen for it to become the past, or does the past create itself? We may never be able to truly experience that moment. We may never be able to truly experience that definite objective reality, because by the time it reaches us, it's subjective. It has been skewed by the human experience. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an objective thing there that is moving towards us. That doesn't mean that there isn't, an objective reality. We may not be able to experience it, but something is happening for us to experience. And whatever that thing is, to me, that is, that I guess that's proof enough to me that there is an objective reality. There is something out there, that is, you could say, realer than the human experience.
I don't understand how you get to it. We went through this last week. If it does not apply to you and never can and never will, in which way can you show me that what you're saying is right? How?
It is applying to me because I'm experiencing it.
What are you experiencing?
I'm experiencing an approximation of objective reality.
Okay, I accept the fact that you're experiencing an approximation. Okay, fair enough. I have no problem with that.
No, but the thing is that, but to say that there is no objective reality because we can't experience it, I think is wrong.
Yeah, but on what basis are you saying it's wrong?
Because we can only experience an approximation.
Correct.
There's no definite basis for you to say there is no objective reality because everything to us is approximate.
But then in that case, I can say there's no objection to me saying that there are, sorry, Roland, there are pixies sitting at the bottom of my garden who come in every day and sew all my clothes and tidy them up. I don't see them. I don't see the clothes being tidied up, but I know there must be, because why not? But that's not evidence. Where's the argument here?
Well, the argument is that I'm not saying that your individual reality is, I guess, can be anything that it wants it to be. So that means, pixies and fairies. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I do think that there is no concrete basis for us to say that there is no concrete basis at all. I don't think, because like you said, our experience is approximate. That's all we can say, that our experience of
so
whatever
this
is
approximate.
Or to an extent, but the idea
approximately
that,
we agree.
Well, yes, approximately we agree. But but to say that there is no objective reality, that there is no actual thing, I don't think like I said, I don't think there's a definite basis for us to even say that, because it's all just approximate to us. It's all just a skewed version of reality. So we can't say that there is no reality because there is no definite basis for us to stand
on. As I said in the beginning, when I started talking, we all need to feel that there's something definitely there, which you're now saying. So fair enough. We all feel like we think there is, and we all feel very comfortable knowing that there is something there. So that's fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Thank you, Curry. Thank you. We'll be back. I'm sure we'll be back. Mark, hi.
That was a fantastic talk. Thank you. You raised so many amazing points. I kind of wrote my response in a couple of paragraphs to keep it brief so everybody can maybe get in here. So I'll just kind of read it so we can get to it quickly. So you mentioned Hegel, and I'm glad you did. So you also said all is knowledge. Well, Hegel says knowledge is the principle which unites subjectivity with objectivity. But the only certain knowledge is the one which is not finite. Finitude is the introduction of approximate knowledge. But certain knowledge can only occur if we negate our finitude to begin with and begin presuppositionlessly. Descartes tried to do this and arrived at cogito ergo sum. But Hegel says that he makes an implicit assumption that the self is needed to be thinking at all. Hegel becomes more Descartesian than Descartes and performs an absolute negation which negates everything, including the self. This absolute negation is so absolute that it negates even its own self, but this pure thought has nowhere to go but into less than nothingness, which Hegel calls pure being. We might think that it is the observer doing the thinking here, but the thinker has also been negated in the absolute negation. There is no one thinking this pure thought or this pure being. Pure being in its sheer immediate indeterminacy thinks its own self. This is the only way to arrive at the true dialectical knowledge by canceling not only our own bias, but by canceling ourselves entirely. This is the only and first true certain thought outside finitude, by being inside finitude as the genuine infinite. This was the move of immanence which no one logically or scientifically, neither from the scholastics nor Kant or anybody, could reach, whether from an external God to the thing in itself. It is the first universal of universal knowledge. All meaning is derived from this. If it is not, it is approximate. So if you construct the axioms of mathematics based on this, you can arrive at a particular example where we can recalculate infinitesimal calculus, where the approximations under a curve where you're estimating the area through a Riemann sum can be solved perfectly with integrals, which can give the exact area under a curve and something that we can be certain of, not only through the self-definition of the laws of mathematics, but also epistemologically by grounding the axioms of mathematics on the pure logic of universal dialectics, beginning with the only true beginning, which is the sheer indeterminate immediate of pure being.
Very, very nice, very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. Yep. Yes, he went very far, and Derrida went as far and further, right? You're familiar with Derrida, by the way?
A little bit about it. I think it was that difference or something he said. I'm not as familiar, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it gets very, very deep and dodgy, and yeah, if you follow that, you will get somewhere by getting nowhere. And I don't mean that superficially. I mean that I think that was the whole point. And it's I don't know how that helps us in dealing with daily life, right? I like it very much. The difference between yes, it's ontology pure. On the other hand, I'm more epistemological in my way of thinking, but that is a complete different story. I personally, I would say that ontology does not exist without epistemology. I just don't. I don't see how it can. It's basically what Carrie and I were talking about. That if you take yourself away, I don't know where anything is. So that I have a problem with that, but it's very, very interesting. Thank you very much. It was very good. Very, very nice. Thank you. We'll come back. Won't let you go that easily. Thank you. Agustin, hi.
Hi.
¿Cómo
Yes.
estás?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. So I've done the same as Mark. I'm not gonna recite Hegel, but I've worded my intervention briefly in a couple of paragraphs. So it's like two parts. It's like two parts. So the first one is that I'm going to say, Ron, yes, I agree with the idea of approximation as the only certainty of reality. But what I will like to throw as a question for you will be, how do we define approximation? What will be a definition of approximation that we could use for this? So there are a few questions, there are a few follow-up questions. So when we define the approximation, what will be its characteristics? So if I understood well your point, we are unable to use absolute to set the boundaries of approximations because absolute don't exist. So then what can we use to define the boundaries, to have a complete idea of approximation, or will it have to be approximate? It seems kind of like at least the boundaries between being and nothingness will be the way in which we could define this approximation. But then I will wonder if being and nothingness are two different certainties, or rather are kind of like macro, like big approximations that approximations that will include others, no? Like the approximation of being will include my one, which has a certain time in my life, no? So in this sense, I think this is very close to what Maurice says in his intervention, because he talked about life and death are the only certainties, right? So that I'm wondering, and at the same time, I'm wondering, like Olga said, about levels, or rather grades of approximation. Is there like different levels? Like there are things that endure more the pass of time than others. So then will it be things that are actually more approximate than others? No. So that's actually my intervention regarding approximation. I hope that was clear. And now my second part is about history. In your intervention, Ron, you used the example of history, and I like the way it was used. Absolutely, I will agree that historians have an approximate knowledge of history, of course, but it seems to me that we are understanding history in a very basic sense, because on a deeper level for historians, history is not simply the telling of the past. And I'm quoting now the historian Edward Carr, his book, What is History? He defines history as the research of the past that help us explain the present. So the idea is always not simply telling the past, but actually telling in a way we understand how the present is. Approximately, of course. It can be the other way. He defines as well history as researching the present to explain how it came that to be, to explain the past. No, and my point with history and other disciplines, as with different sciences, is that they are more focused on interpreting the world rather than defining whether the world is absolute or approximate. Oh, and regarding the point that Debbie said before about that, at least we could be certain that we have progress. This book that I quote has a great chapter on the idea of progress, and it shows how progress is actually there is progress in history, of course, and we have progressed, but it's artificial. It's not natural. It's something that we've been building and we have to keep defending. But it's an artificial idea. So that was my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a number of very interesting points. I can't go into them, but talking about being and the problem with defining things is a huge problem. You want to define the undefinable. You want to define what approximate is. And once we use that horrible word is, we're in immediate trouble, because to define approximation is doing the exact thing that we can't do with it. Because how can you define approximation? You can define something that is real in the way that you think it is. So I can touch this table and say this table is real because I can touch it, but then you can go on with all sorts of stuff, and that doesn't work either. But to define what's approximate, you'll have to show that something's approximate, and then you're going into my whole half-hour talk again. Because you're going around in some sort of circle. I've always been upset by people saying, let's go to dictionary, we can define what it is. What are you talking your philosophy? I can tell you what consciousness is. I go to the dictionary and I'll open the dictionary. Of course, the dictionary doesn't tell us what something is and what things are. We can go now into dictionary and find out what approximation is. We're going to get something very, very nice, but then there's a huge problem with definitions, and definitions are always approximate. The definition of the definition is approximate, and we are stuck within our own approximation, right? So that it's problematic, and that's why I chose the topic anyway. Because why would I choose an easy topic? None of you have ever been with anything easy that I ever talked about.
Absolutely.
Why would I do that? I have to. I mean, approximation is a problem.
Yeah.
And what is interesting is that science is getting us more and more approximation. That's what I find interesting. Instead of solving problems, it's giving us more problems, and they're all to do with approximations. And how is that, and why is that, and what does it mean, and what does it mean about us? If we're becoming more sophisticated, perhaps we're becoming more close to what we are, which is approximate.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely, and I agree entirely. And actually, if we try to grasp a whole definition, an exact definition, it will be approximate, and we will call that a reductio ad absurdum, because we will go in circles all the time. And I agree with the idea of science. I totally agree. I'm thinking right now an example about the COVID the COVID pandemic, no? And the example was very, very interesting. So when researchers started to work around how COVID was spreading, there was this idea that was spreading through small particles that was left in surface. So people that were working in the front line, they have to wipe everything because right now we're in the pandemic and so on. And later on, it was discovered, nevertheless, that COVID traveled through air at the same time. So if you were, all of you, I work in a school, no? So if when I was working at a school, all my students with face mask, myself with a face mask, if there was someone that was infected with the SARS COVID-19, if we spend more than an hour there, we were gonna get it, despite of the mask, despite of wiping the surface. You need to purify the air because it's traveling through the air. And that was, we had an approximate knowledge of COVID, and then we have maybe a more approximate knowledge of what COVID is. Yes, absolutely. But still, nevertheless, if my epistemological starting point is approximation, at least I will defend to have a finite and precise concept of it.
Yes, we all want that precision. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Augustine. James, at last, you made it to the corner.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Everything. I just want to give my qualifications first. I was in the 5th grade once, and they taught us how to do averaging at the beginning of the year, I think. And then sometime later in the year, there was this lesson on how you can use averaging to approximate an answer. And it was like, boom, you know, like, in other words, the greatest truth, you know, like sort of fell upon me from heaven. And then the second kind of like usage was I was raised a classical musician, you know, classically trained, and then I became a jazz musician. And then when I became a jazz musician, my friends loved the expression, "That's good enough for, it's good enough for jazz." So in other words, approximation is the name of the game. In jazz, you don't have to write all the notes down. You'll never get, if you write the notes down precisely, you'll never get actually what was played. You'll get, you know, some approximation of it. So that kind of got ingrained in my mind too. This idea that there's an alternative to precision, and that is approximation. But I'm still against your skeptical bent, Ron. And this has to do with
I did not
logic.
expect you to not say the but. I was waiting for it.
Yeah. All right. I didn't even have to utter the word though. But that's good.
No, you didn't.
But yeah. So the idea that what you say, what you generally start with is a proclamation. You know that everything is approximate. So, and then you sort of like work from there, and you use logic and you use syllogisms, which are basically a way of using identity and logic in order to extrapolate truths from previous assumptions and definitions. So, so you're basically inside that language game, you know, that we all play, and which is really important. And the syllogism is working with the is. It's always a case of declaring something, and that something has to be true or it's not exactly true. And this idea of approximation is true is kind of like based on that kind of regard for logic. In other words, there is no identity. There is only identity when I say there is, you know, and you say that a lot, you know, that what is. So I'm just saying there's kind of like a skeptical philosophy of pretension going on. And we mustn't forget that, like, mathematically, in abstract algebra, everything is based on the one. We derive everything in mathematics off of the one, even quantum mechanics. Eventually, we get there. And so the whole idea that the definition or the is something evil is kind of counterintuitive, and in a kind of like a scary, oh, we're all Buddhists at heart kind of way. So I don't think I don't think it's a good direction to follow. We have to recognize that even if we don't call them absolutes, there are the basis for many things. So there's a basis in mathematics based on the one. There's a basis in philosophical thinking, you know, based on in science, it's observation. In philosophical thinking, it's based on metaphysics, such as being and the one. And somebody already spoke about the fact that being is a flip. It's just like 1 and 0. It's a being or it's nothing. It's one or the other. And that thinking occurs in that relationship. So I just wanted to, I'm sorry, it was Mark. It was excellent, Mark. So just want to sort of say on the very bottom of this discussion, there is the Greek concept of legein. There's the idea that things have a meaning and that we say the meaning, and then people understand the meaning, and that's the word for that is truth. So it's kind of like you don't have a definition for truth, and there needs to be a definition for truth. And yeah, so that's sort of what's missing from the discussion, I think, that you've been making.
Okay, thank you very much. Your but was quite mild this time. No,
I
no.
didn't have to redefine time. That was good.
Yeah, that's also something. Yeah, look, yeah, you always blame me for playing with language. I have no other way to explain things to you other than with language. I can't do anything else. I could, if I want to talk to you about nothing and nothingness, and at the point where I talk about nothing with a capital N, which is the absence of everything, including myself, including all of us, there's no explanation I can give to that other than talking about it or writing it down. And you'll say to me, but you are mentioning it. And I'll say, but there's nothing else I can do. All I can try and explain is what happens if we're not here. And then you'll say, but I am here. And I say, yes, but let's imagine you're not. And you say, I can't do that. And then in that case, I can't say anything. In that case, we're stuck. So it's always a problem with language, because the good part about language is that it's approximate. That's the good part. That's the good part. We can talk about anything, and we understand each other. If we understand the jargon, then we understand each other, which is terrific. But imagine we didn't. A language was so exact, we would not understand each other, because we'd be speaking our own individual language. We would be, and it's a problem. Language is approximate. It's wonderful. It's why we sit here and we can discuss things. And I don't know what things are, by the way. You're asking me, what do you mean by things? We can go into this forever.
Well, things are communicable because they make sense, because they have meaning, and that not because there was a kind of like a random approximation of in language. Because meaning was expressed, then somebody could agree with you or disagree with you. And so I'm just saying, you know, you can actually have things that have meaning for others, or you can basically not have such good truths in your speech, and you can use straw men a lot. So it's really a choice that people make when they speak. So it's not the language is not a I don't think it's quite the crap game that you say it is.
Oh, I never said that. I never even hinted it. I said that it is flexible, extremely flexible enough for us to understand each other, even if we use the wrong word. We might put in the wrong word. We made a mistake, but we'll not understand what you really meant. I don't mean you. I mean we really meant, because it's flexible. That's the beauty of language, and that's why we sit here and we can discuss stuff. But it's the approximation that we need to keep in mind. In my opinion, that was the point of today's chat, was that let's not fear approximation. It might be something very good. It might be a way of riding the wave. The water doesn't go like this. The water goes like this. Let's ride it. You see, I did this without even using the words.
Okay, I'm just putting in a good word for the other side. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Certainty is not an evil. Language is not an evil, you know, and syllogisms are your tool, and you know, we need to use those.
We do. Thank you very much, James. Thank you. Saket, yes.
Hello, everyone. So I've written a lot of words here. I don't know where to start from, but yeah. So you said that everything is approximate. I think this very sentence proves that there is an absolute, and the approximation is closer to that absolute. The moment you say approximation, you have confirmed the absolute, because otherwise, without in relation to absolute, there is no approximation. And I would like to bring in here Advaita, non-duality. But there is an absolute which is having no experience, and which I think we all have in our 24 hours of time in deep sleep, where there is no experience, and it's an absolute, and it's state of not knowing, and I think somebody mentioned Hegel. I think this is what pure being all about, like that absence of knowledge, absence of experience. And from where this search of trying to know, trying to experience arise, I think it is from the point of prior knowledge, from the reference. It takes reference in relation, in comparison, and in confirmation to prior knowledge. And that is what self, I think that is what self is. Because in the moment of deep sleep, or in the moment of when our attention is 100% completely into something that we don't even remember ourselves, or we don't even remember what we know, there is no trying to relate, there is no trying to compare, there is no trying to confirm, and there is no self as well. So this idea of approximation comes from this reference point, which is into knowledge, and it's an assumption. It's an assumption, and without knowledge, it has no ground. So I think negation of everything, and also observer, the effect of observer. That's a center point from where all things are, I think, coming into existence, and that observer and self are one and the same thing, I would say. So I think the probability, the idea of probability comes with the prior knowledge. Without that, it's not possible to even think about it. It's not even possible to look at something. For example, if we look at a picture, like if there are 100 things in the picture, we only can see things which we know, and rest of the things are not even seen, let alone identified. So I don't think there is any such thing as approximation. Yes, there is a thing called absolute, and which is what Marx is pure being, and it's I would say it's a state of not knowing that we all have in deep sleep, and that's an absolute.
Yeah, I don't, thank you very much. I don't agree with some of the things you said. I mean, that's okay, yes? It's part of my job description, all right? But I know this is like blasphemy. I don't think that being is anything if you don't know your being. I know you won't like that very much, but there are two sorts of being, as far as I can see it. There are what other things are and what I am. I mean, you, each one of us. If you are in a deep sleep, which never happens to me, by the way, if you're in a deep sleep and you don't know anything, there's nothing you can say about that. You can't say that is something. You can say, I was in a deep sleep, I don't remember anything. So what does that give us? It doesn't give us being, it gives us a blank. That's my, that's how I see
you
being.
Sorry to cut you. You can say that's nothing. You can call it nothing.
No, I wouldn't. Hang on. Be careful when you use nothing.
Being is nothing. Being is nothing. This is what I think. The state of not knowing is nothing. You literally don't know what is in front of you or what is happening. There is no center here in that state. You are not using prior knowledge. There is no reference point. There is no comparison. There is no measurement.
So what is it?
Complete negation. This is what I think Hegel said the same thing. It's just being, just staying.
But okay.
Without search.
I know we're getting into deep water here, so I've got to be careful. I'm not in that bent. I mean, it's not my thing. All right. So I'm trying to be very whatever, if you don't feel and nothing is happening at all to you, that is not an is, and it's not an it. I don't know what it is, but it's not being. I mean, if somebody sees you lying there, then that is being for that person who sees you as being. But for you who are out of it, you have to explain to me why that is being if you're not.
It's physical being, you can say. So there are two kinds of being here. Psychological being, which is completely a construct, and this is what I was talking about, the self, the observer, which is a psychological being, which is the center point from which we experience the world. And that one thing is, it's in non-duality also, it says that that's an illusion. There is no center, there is no psychological being. All there is the collection of knowledge, experiences. And in the deep sleep, it does not exist. That's why there is no observer. That's why there is no experiencer. There is a physical body, definitely. And I think that physical body is absolute being.
Yeah, but you don't know there's a physical. You
Yes.
who are deep asleep do not know there's a physical body.
Because
right?
I as know myself is an illusion, psychological being. It does not exist.
Okay.
I don't exist as a psychological being. Except a bunch of knowledge.
But when you're in the state of not being aware of anything, what
I wouldn't
what
say,
are you?
I wouldn't say not being aware. I would say there is a point where there is no identification. It's very hard. It's very difficult to I didn't make a concept out of it. Being in the state of not knowing, because it's not knowing. It's nothing. How can you say anything about it? Then it will be something that you can pinpoint. You can't. Difficult. But there is a feeling. In 24 hours, if you observe, it's something which really I've observed this. There's so many moments when this state of not experiencing, state of not knowing, and in that state, everything is perfect. Like not in the sense of that means there is no conflict with anything.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you, Saket. Thank you. Vika, your turn. You've made it to the corner.
I made it. Thank you. I think I actually wrote a book as you guys were talking, so that was very productive. But when we started the conversation, Ron, you were talking about language a little bit, how a difficult language can not reach many. And I guess that is where I go with this, with approximation in philosophy, and in philosophy altogether. I like and I live the way that I walk with my head in the clouds, and I appreciate the scenery that I experience for myself above and beyond. But at the same time, I do like my feet to touch the ground, and I like the touch of the little pebbles, and I like the touch of the humanity and everything that life down here would give me. Where I'm going with that is when I think about something like free will or approximation, I look at myself and I look at the world around me. But what can I do with all these ideas and thoughts and explorations of all these beautiful words and thoughts and all of that? At the beginning, Debbie mentioned something about how life has advanced, how we don't die as soon or as quick or as we did before, how life has become so much better for us as humans. But there's so much that is only approximate, right? I'm sitting here in Canada, I'm living a beautiful life, I'm in safety, I have clean water, I have enough food to eat. I'm not afraid of any bombs falling on my home. I'm not afraid of my children going out and not ever coming back. And that is only approximate, is not the case for the majority of people living on this earth. So again, where I'm going with this is, how can we make the idea of approximation valuable and useful in the way that we live our lives? I would like to bring that to something that is very, very important to me and is very, very dear to my heart, and that is empathy. There's an Afghan proverb that says, John as John to rest, which means life is far from life. Again, it means if you tell me that you have a sore throat right now, I may feel bad for you, but I don't know how bad your throat hurts. I have absolutely no idea. I can tell you, here, I have some medication I can give you. I can make you some milk and honey. I can make you some tea, and that will comfort you. Get some rest, and the day after, you will be good to go to school, or you would be good to go to work or attend another meeting. But I have absolutely no idea how your throat hurts. So when I look at myself as a human being, the way I feel your pain, the way I feel what you tell me with the language that you tell me, the way I observe how you walk, how you live is only approximate. Why is it important? Because it makes me who I am, the way I feel you, the way I connect with you as a human being, and the way I connect with life altogether. So my understanding of approximation is extremely important in the way that the person that I make myself. Again, when I look at the world around me, and when I hear of millions of people right now dealing with starvation, children that are dying every day of starvation, families that bury their children in mass graves of starvation, and I sit in my home and I think, well, maybe tomorrow, if I have time, I will go and donate $20. It's because I feel your pain only approximately. I don't know how you hurt, right? Because I can't connect with you. So what can I do about that? This is where it becomes very, very important to me. A few times you said, this is a beautiful thing. And it really is. The difficulties that we have in life, our understanding of free will, does it exist or not? I am not a believer of free will at all, but I find it useful in the way that I move myself, in the way that I move someone else close to me. Just get up and do something because you have a choice. I may or may not have a choice, but the way what I make of myself is very important. That is the choice that I make. So the connection that I make with life, the connection that I make with humanity, the way that I practice becoming a human, becoming humane, is very important to me when I use proximity, and the way that I apply that to everyday life. And I think probably that would be all that I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you were talking, I was wondering, because I agree, I've used this many times, that we cannot know how somebody else feels. We cannot do it, however close we are. We just cannot do it. When your child goes to the dentist, you want to take that pain away. You can't. It's his or her pain. And it's very, very frustrating. And I was thinking while you were talking, perhaps it's an evolutionary thing. Perhaps it's good that we can't feel everybody's pain. Imagine that we felt everybody's pain. Imagine the state we'd be in. Perhaps it's a protection that we can remove ourselves from some horror that's going on all around us. Maybe, I don't know. It just occurred to me as you were talking.
It definitely could be, but at the same time, just imagine if you felt my pain, if I said my family members in Kabul are dying of hunger. If you felt that pain from me, if I felt the pain of people that are going through that right now, I may have actually been moved to do something, right? We're living in the world that, let's say, many years ago, people died of diseases. Today, people die in masses of bombardments. People die under rockets. People die in various ways of the ways that we inflict pain through war on other people. If we did feel their pain, maybe we would have taken a step back and we would have thought, how am I contributing to this? And what can I do about it?
Maybe this has got something to do with what Olga said about degrees of approximation. I mean, we couldn't possibly feel the exact same pain that somebody else has got. You wouldn't be able to function. So maybe there, let's say there are degrees of it that you can feel a bit of it. I don't know, but the notion that you can feel the exact pain sounds horrific to me. I don't know how you can even function. So yeah, thank you very much. That's very interesting and very, very true. Very true. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Michael, hi there.
Hi. So it's a so big topic, and there are so many interesting aspects of this already discussed, but maybe just a couple for which I may have time. Ron, as you probably know, I agree with your premise that everything is approximate, and I am taking even more radical position on this, because you may remember that we had some argument about life and death, whether this is also approximate, or is it strictly defined, or black and white, as you would say. And I made a point that maybe even life and death to some degree can be approximate, because what we consider is as a death of an organism, this organism is only one thread in the huge tree of life, and the end of this organism is actually not complete end of all that this organism could bring into life. So in this sense, it could be also approximate. But moreover, I would take it even further, and I would say that even this notion that everything is approximate itself is approximate, because there could be some things that maybe it does not make sense to consider them as approximate. One important distinction that I would make that between approximate and observer dependent, or relative to an observer. These are two different ways how the same, what some people like to call truth, would appear different to different people, but not necessarily because the ways how you measure this are approximate. Maybe you could take pretty precise measurements of something, but the results would depend on observer. So that's another source of this uncertainty and all these arguments about who is right, what is truth, what is reality, because it could be reality, it could be truth, it can be very well defined in principle, but it just appears differently depending on who you look, how you look at this, and this is not the same kind of approximation as approximation in your models, or approximation in the ways how you could take your measurements or observation. Another point that I'd like to make is that yes, it's the notion of communication. If you know, in general relativity, there are two main ideas. One is what I just mentioned, that observer dependency or relativity, and another one is equivalence. So there are certain things that appear different for different observers, but essentially they're the same. But maybe what is missing is this notion of communication. So somehow we manage by taking this different views of reality, or maybe you could question that there is a reality at all, but anyway, somehow we managed to converge to something that we could all agree. And we cannot always do this. And sometimes this is very, very difficult. But this is how we arrive to something that we could put in language, in theories that we could discuss, and could somehow understand each other and somehow act collectively, act together. And that's the most important thing. So maybe some people would agree that, okay, maybe I don't understand the world, maybe I don't know what I am doing, but what is really important for us to survive is to do something that helps us survive. And many things that we have to do for this is together with other people. And this is maybe this junction between theoretical and practical issues that Fika implied, that how can we bring our this philosophical concepts to the real world, and how to use them so that it would help us. And this is something I think is an important aspect of all our, as fascinating as they are, but theoretical discussions, that we have to keep in mind that then after our discussion is over, we have to keep living, we have to do something together with other people, maybe try to help other people if we can. So that's something that I think is important. And another notion regarding how can we, say a tennis player or someone act so accurately based on imprecise information. And a part of this answer is that when we have a very limited time for reaction, for response, we actually act based on our prediction. And this is what our brain is doing. Our brain, the way how it presents the world and the motion in the world to us, it's what will happen about a half a second or a second later than now. And if not this, no one would be able to catch the ball. Or to hit the ball, because our processing speed just not sufficient for it. So we have to make these predictions, and I think this is also one important idea. How are we dealing with this uncertainty and approximations? That our brains developed some ways to fill the gaps in this by extrapolating or making more sophisticated predictions, making models of the world, and so on. So somehow we are finding maybe also approximate ways, but ways to deal with this approximate nature of reality and make it a little less approximate, or at least more tenable for us. And so let me stop at this, but this is really so big topic.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Very interesting indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Bill, hi.
Hi. I like approximation. And as I've heard the comments today, it occurs to me that there are degrees of confidence that vary with what's approximate. In other words, when you make a decision based on approximation of knowledge, do I rely on that automatically, or do I investigate its reliability somehow? And the investigation of reliability of an approximation seems to me to be like what science does, and what due diligence does, and what investigation does, to make sure that what I'm getting as an approximate pitch is something I can do, build a bridge about, conduct an operation about, or I can convict someone of a crime about. But I have no idea whether approximation alone gives us the reach and the understanding of the nuance of reliability that always is in play. I mean, a conspiracy theory that we're replacing our non-white population is bullshit. It has no reliability, yet it has currency, and it is an approximation of a situation that's going on in our society, has gone on in colonialism, and has gone on elsewhere in the country when we have, let's make America great again. So we have to be really good critics of approximations by having reasonable standards for testing them. And if we don't do that, we're lost. And approximation alone is not going to do the job unless we say approximation subject to a standard of correctness of some sort. And that's the idea I want to get across, because, you know, I read enough history to know that historians don't record what happened. They write a good story. They write stories about tragedies. They write stories about comedies. They write stories about all those things that are literary in character. They're approximations because they fit the story or they fit the facts, but they're not the facts. And we can't know what the facts are when we read the narrative. And so I think there's a lot of flexibility in this idea of approximation, but it's basically accurate. Language is use. Language is not reference. And if language is use, we got to have good tests for how we use it to describe or make representations about our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, that's yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. But the point is, as soon as you say we have to be able to test it, then now you're asking who's going to do the testing.
I'm going to do the testing because I'm making the decision based on it. And my test may be lousy, or I may rely on someone else to give us the answer. But I thought that science was a way of testing approximations about knowledge and reality.
Until it's proven to be wrong.
Well, but all science is tentative in that way.
Yeah.
It is subject to replacement when a better theory comes around, right?
Yeah. But what do you do with people who have these conspiracy theories, etc., etc.? Who are you going to put up and say we're going to decide that this is rubbish and this is okay? If there are more of them.
We're in deep trouble, Ron.
Yep.
If more of them are out there. Deep trouble. And the idea is, unless we get clear with these people about how conspiracies are at work in our elections, how the election wasn't stolen, the next one's going to be stolen as well. And so this is a crisis of philosophy, a crisis of knowledge, that the prevalence of stupidity and distortion and ideology is going to overtake our better judgment about whether the good approximations we have are going to work to make us make the right decisions.
And can I quickly interject something here? So this may be an example when what is missing is communication and this notion of observer-dependent reality. Because people who believe in these conspiracy theories, they have their reasons. Okay, so we don't accept these reasons, but they have reasons. And the only way to do something about this is more communication and trying to converge to some shared reality that is missing. And it is so much missing in our country now. But this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're in big trouble. That's what you're saying, right, Bill?
Yes.
I think
big trouble. How do where do we get the education? Where do we get the insight? Where are the reporters? Where are the writers? Where is the communication going to take place to reframe the craziness? And I don't know the answer, but I know I'm trying to think through what to do about it, because if I don't, I know that my kids are in big trouble.
I think the answer to the question is that you have to tell the truth. In other words, there's reasons for these things. I think you have even alluded to them, that there's a certain truth to the fact that there's a lower population of whites than before in certain countries, and those reasons have to be given, and don't allow matters to be obfuscated by combination. In other words, just simply saying that this has something to do with lack of faith in democracy. No, it doesn't. Those are two different, completely different issues. So even if they both are, you know, conspiracy theories.
Right.
And that's assuming that people believe in these things for logical reasons. You know, it may just be they are following a feeling. They feel a particular way about their world, and so they kind of just accept those things that confirm that feeling. So there may be no way of actually being able to logically tell a person that, no, there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances that lead to this type of situation and stuff like that. You know, having that part of conversation about approximation and how it relates to us in our daily lives and how we go about things is that type of conversation always has to be tempered with the knowledge that we're not existing in our world alone, that we're all in this together in an extent. So we kind of have to temper our expectations and our wants of reality, and knowing that reality must be for all of us in an extent. So, but if people aren't willing to make that sacrifice, if you would, if people aren't willing to make that logical leap and only are trying to exist in a place that confirms their reality as opposed to our shared reality, then, you know, everything breaks down.
Yeah, right.
Roland, you're coming in at a very good point. A good state in the argument, actually.
Yeah, it's there's just so many different things in this discussion. I was going to try and sort of, I don't know, dip into some things that a lot that have been said, kind of join them together into something. And I suppose it kind of focuses on this. Actually, the thing that really jumped out was James's one as an absolute, and I don't agree it's an absolute, and I'll say why. It's to do with sameness. If we accept that change is happening continuously, then for something to be the same, there has to be a loss of resolution. Something can't be the same as it was 5 seconds ago, and yet we say it is. If there was no difference, sorry, if there was continuous difference, you could say, if there was continuous change, and that change was known about, was if we could be conscious of continuous change, then we would be conscious of no sameness at all. There would be no one. There would be nothing ever the same because there's continuous change. So for there to be any sameness at all, there has to be a loss of resolution. There has to be an assumption that what is going on is the same as it was before, that there was no change. Now, this idea is quite interesting, because how does that happen? How can it happen that there is the experience of sameness? Somehow or other, it would be necessary for what has happened to influence what is happening. In other words, there would have to be some kind of recursion going, where it's possible now to refer back to what has been and eliminate all the difference between them and say it's the same. Now that strikes me as not an absolute at all. That sounds like to me an extremely complex process that involves highly specific pattern recognition of some kind. And moreover, not merely recognition of that pattern, but the pattern itself becomes an influence on the present as well. So as I said, some kind of recursive process going on. I can't really see how sameness is possible without that. Now that also suggests that sameness and organization are intimately connected. And that led me to think about the relationship with life and death that Morris started talking about. And I think there's something interesting here as well, because sameness indicates continuity of some kind. And so for us to say anything is the same, and I'm not saying two objects are the same. I'm talking about even identifying anything, simply identifying one, as James referred to, requires continuity of consciousness of some kind, and this recursive influence of the past upon the present. So then my next thought was to connect that with what Debbie was saying about Plato and the idea of striving for something. It strikes me that any system that is able to present itself with awareness of sameness must be organized, as I've said, and it must be organized around some kind of reference. And there's no reason to believe that multiple systems would be organized around the same reference. There could well be completely different references. And if we look around at life forms that we see, that seems to be plausible. I don't see that plants organize themselves in the same way as animals. I don't see that fungi organize themselves the same way as plants. And of course, each individual plant organizes itself in a particular way, as each individual human does. So there's no reason to suppose that this reference around which we organize ourselves should be the same for every person. So that kind of then leads into the last bit of this discussion, which is about, you know, how do collectives of people behave? And that's a really difficult one, because we have no idea whether the references around which we all integrate have, you know, to what extent they have similarity and to what extent they don't. The typical problem in like communities where people start off with some great idea about a community, and they all get together and start working together, and then, you know, the differences start to become apparent, and the whole thing begins to break down because there is no common organizing reference. So I suppose what I'm getting at here is this issue of approximation, which I haven't used the word approximation so far, because basically what I'm saying is it's actually analogous, or in fact, that's the same as the problem of sameness, that for anything to be regarded as the same, for anything to be stated as is, requires sameness, and therefore requires a massive loss of resolution. In other words, all the differences between the things that are asserted to be the same, and that is space and time, obviously, in relation to any perception, have to be eliminated and disregarded for us to say that something is the same. And that process, however that goes on, is likely, it seems, to be fairly unique to the individual that is doing that. So what else? Yeah, I think probably I'll stop there. I've slightly run out of steam there, so I'm feeling a bit tired today. So, but I hope that's. I feel that is. There is one thing I wanted to say actually, which was, it seems to me that approximation is therefore absolutely unavoidable. And I say absolutely, simply because the very idea of isness as a given, if we say that we recognize things, identities as a given, then approximation is also given. In other words, it flows directly from the idea of isness and one. So yeah, that's what I would say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roland. Thank you. Very nice. Fred, hi there. Been waiting a long time. Sorry about that.
And maybe I'll wait a little longer. I think that James can respond more directly to Roland's comments, so I would prefer for James to respond first, if that's okay with you, James.
Yeah, I'll respond to Roland and then clear the decks for Fred. I think that's what he wants. Yeah, I really appreciate what you had to say, Roland, about sameness and the difference. I see this immediately, right, in the difference between the mathematical difference between 1 and 0, which is the basis for a lot of advanced mathematical applications, such as things like variance, and so forth. So the difference between 1 and 0 is a very critical concept in mathematics, and as you said, it's something that's affected by change. We can have the one, like in one laser printer or one table or chair, can be affected by augmentation or diminution. So this is something that's very but I made a point in the chat, which I think is also very important, is that when we have many, then the data becomes such, and that the many are measured over time, then we are introduced into statistics. So we're not just making temporal measurements of mercury in a tube, but in order to measure temperatures, for example. But we're actually, what some people call reality, and Aristotle called actuality, which is a better term, I think. And but it can also be called temporality. In other words, space and time, which is a much more 20th century concept. So the loss of resolution as a principle requiring a recursive process of re-recognition is as a necessity for sameness, in order for sameness to persist, is a very good point. We don't see that when we're measuring tables, counting laser printers, and and so forth. So the recursive process of recognition is absolutely essential, acknowledging that augmentation and diminution occurs even to singles. Absolutely. But does that change the nature of the discussion in a really important way? So in other words, it's a very good observation, but I think the discussion of the nature of truth, it doesn't change the discussion of the nature of truth. It doesn't change the discussion of the nature of the nature of approximation, but it does say something, a very important thing about science and the attitude that science needs to have to this generalistic concept called reality. Thanks.
Could I just respond quickly to that? You said it doesn't change the nature of the discussion. It strikes me it might well do, because the idea of identification as being rooted in sameness means that anything that one can say about anything has the same loss of resolution. So we're stuck with that when it comes down to any reference to what is. Now, if you're now asking about truth, well, where are we with that? Because basically, if we accept the idea that that identification emerges from a recursive process, then it is that process that we then have to focus on, rather than some arbitrary idea of truth. Because there would be no is without that process.
So Roland, my only objection is that we have a choice, that in any moment in time, we have a choice to identify the process of discovery. The process of discovery can concern an absolute, such as a single, or it can be, we can involve ourselves in some other process, such as the recursive process of identification. But to be sort of like lost in one inappropriately, I think would be a terrible mistake. In other words, if I'm counting laser printers or tables, I don't think I should necessarily get lost in the process of the resolution of the identity of what my purpose is, which is to, in this case, maybe count, or in this case, maybe to identify. In other words, I don't get lost in, quote, reality, unquote. I feel grounded still, even though there is this Heraclitean kind of movement, this constant Heraclitean differentiation of the one and the loss of resolution as a principle, as a scientific, and you're presenting it as a scientific principle. And I completely appreciate that. So in other words, we can't be deferred from purpose. Purpose has meaning, and that determines truth, in my opinion. I have, maybe you and I differ on the meaning of the word truth, but thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that on one level, the practical process of living is, you know, is behind the very reason for sameness. It is life that is behind it, and therefore we have to ask ourselves, why are we thinking about this material in the first place? I suppose I have a reason for that, because as I see it, sameness and the results of that and the loss of resolution that results from it is a limitation on action. It's also a platform for action, of course, because sameness gives rise to our ability to anticipate. But it also limits action because our anticipations can only come from what we already have. So on another level, and this is possibly why this interests me greatly, my interest is in changing my perception of sameness, in not in being totally free from it, because that I don't see as possible, but changing it so as to enable different ways of seeing the situations that arise in my life. So that's why I would consider this to be a useful background, philosophically speaking, because it leads, it provides, you could say, a context within which certain other inferences can be drawn.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Fred, are you okay?
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, both Roland and James' response. James introduced the notion of statistics. I'm not sure that the purpose of, well, I know that the purpose of science is not to identify sameness at some ontological level, but rather reproducibility and predictability, that we discover new things about the world because we can predict from existing patterns expected behavior. In science, we identify two sources of variation, or this might be a species of the approximation that you talk about. Two sources of variation for the expected result. One is measurement error and one is intrinsic variation. measurement error, which I think is had the brunt of our discussion, is of course always there, and scientists are very comfortable with approximation in that sense. We all deal with probability theory and making probabilistic assessments of future behavior. Intrinsic variation is a different matter. Example of intrinsic variation was alluded to earlier 2 times. One with respect to general relativity, and one with respect to quantum mechanics. Philosophers, when they talk about nature, seem to prefer to jump immediately to quantum mechanics as if that is our model of the universe. But in fact, a large part of our observable universe is not probabilistic in nature. In quantum mechanics, Schrödinger's equations, for example, are probability theories, that you have expected results with a probability distribution embedded in the nature of reality. However, there's a broad swath of nature that is not like that, that is more deterministic. Think of Maxwell's equations. So electric circuits, as opposed to electronic circuits, conform to Maxwell's equations, which are 6 concise deterministic rules. Now, if they were probabilistic, we would not be able to do all the wonderful things that we're able to do. For example, our telescopes would always be blurry intrinsically, no matter what we did. When we turned on a light switch, the light may or may not go on intrinsically, regardless of how we developed the electrical circuits. Now, I, with a background in science and math, am really amazed by that. And to me, the thing that's puzzling and that philosophy might want to come to grips with is not approximation or imperfection in our observation of the universe, but how is it that the universe is so predictable? And one point of reference of that is you look at the wonderful new images coming off from the Webb telescope, which has a resolution 10 billion times larger than the naked eye for seeing remote events in space. And I look at those images and I'd say, how on earth is nature, first of all, so predictable, not approximate? And secondly, how on earth are humans so finely attuned to discover and use the predictability, not the unpredictability of nature? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Fred. Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Terry.
Well, Fred said you happened to start right before I was getting on there. I do have to make some comments.
Can't hear you well.
Oh, can you hear me or not?
Now, yes.
Okay. Apparently there's some positional thing with my microphone. Fred, the electromagnetic theory that you just described is indistinguishable from quantum theory. The reason why the telescopes have a finite focus is for the same reason that matter waves also have a finite focus, finite fuzziness to them. The Fourier transform theories that are behind both are identical. Essentially, electromagnetic field theory is just the photon version of what you do with Schrödinger's equation, or from the fermion side. So I would actually suggest just the opposite. What you just said is a beautiful example of how we have a universe that allows us to get incredibly precise, but never quite there, because you never have a perfectly resolved point in a telescope. You only have this interplay of certainty about how much light can you gather tells you how certain you can get. Bigger telescope, more certainty. Smaller telescope, more uncertainty. That actually is the same uncertainty principle in play that you see on quantum mechanics. It's just phrased in a different way. So I think it's an interesting example, but Uh, if I had we're near the end, a parting remark, I'm actually viewing uncertainty approximation in almost the exact opposite way these days, that we don't approximate, we build certainty. We start from a position of just not really having much of anything. Then these various systems get together and we build higher and higher levels of approximation. Telescopes be an example. Get a bigger telescope, you get more certainty. But that's kind of a switch in the usual thing. We keep talking as if there's an infinitely precise certainty underlying everything. I think that's blithering nonsense. I think the formless schools of mathematics pull that over on us and put us behind by about a century. The whole idea of saying probability implies that there's a perfect certainty, and then that you just for some reason can't get to it. That was Minkowski's perfect space-time. He stuck it on top of what Einstein did, forced Einstein to follow him along. Einstein didn't say that. Einstein had clocks. He had imperfect, sloppy clocks that were perfectly quantum. Minkowski said, no, it's all perfect. It's absolutely perfect. You just don't understand. And he set us back for a century because he made it impossible to fuse those two theories together from that point on. You can no longer make space-time quantum if you defined it as being fully classical and fully perfect to begin with, which is what Minkowski did. So no, you're not going to, that wasn't a minor error. That was something that has produced some of the biggest nonsense in the history of science. Many worlds theorems, string theory. Gosh, take your choice. All this stuff is percolating out of somebody defining, says has to have absolute perfection and everything else somehow has to figure that out. And then you get a whole bunch of stuff. And most of modern theoretical physics, unfortunately, has devolved into essentially philosophical forms of mysticism that don't actually attach to reality anymore. But again, and this has surprised me, this is just from really the last couple of months. I like Minkowski's work. The limits he talks about are viable, but you're not going to figure out how the world works. And this is something science has to get around. And I think we're not going to make progress without this. The reason you can't merge these two theorems has nothing to do with finding some incredibly exotic something or other buried in the bottoms of some huge set of equations. That's nonsense. It was a mistake. It was a stupid mistake. It was the guy who said, I like perfection, therefore, Einstein, my old student, you have to follow me. If you don't follow me, I'm going to get mad at you. And Einstein followed him. And he abandoned what he was doing. It was the right thing and started going down this path where it was enforced the inability to put those together. How did I get onto this rant? Sorry, guys. I'm looking for interesting things these days.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very, very interesting.
Respond just real briefly. I think we might consider that there's a difference between predictability and perfection. There in our observations are always subject to tolerances of our ability to measure results. But what's surprising to me is that so much of the universe obeys these very regular laws rather than probabilistic distributions. It allows us to do all the wonderful things that we can do. Not perfect, our measurements by no means are perfect, but we do have incredible predictive value.
Oh, and that's where we do very well, because what it is, the more mass you get behind it, the more mass energy, the more precise you can get. Simple as that. You get down to the quantum mechanics, all the quantum domain is a lack of sufficient information storage to make anything else. It's not some infinite superposition of an infinite number of worlds. It's nonsense. It doesn't have the material to build anything. You ran out. You don't have any more. The electron's too light. It can't have a good position because it hasn't got enough storage. Can't tell you where it is. And this is something that we have to get around. And so everything you just said is true. The universe is very precise. Fred, don't get me wrong. It's extremely precise in an algorithmic sense. It creates algorithms that allow us to push perfection to any limit we want to, but we can never get there. And that's a very different kind of approach when you get to the nitty-gritty part. When you get down to the fine tuning, That's when it makes a difference. You can't merge quantum with relativity if you insist that, oh, the relativity is perfect to begin with. There is no physical evidence for that. You cannot measure space-time without a clock. You cannot make a clock without a particle. You cannot make a particle without having a finite limit. So where did Minkowski come up with infinitely perfect, infinitely fine space-time? He just wanted it. He said, hey, that's what I'm going to do. So stuck it on, put it down. So the limits are there. The universe is very well defined, has incredibly precise limits. Space-time, if anything, is smoother under this definition than anything else. But it's not infinite. It's all limited. Just, you got so much, that's the best you can do. Put in more, you get more. So, sorry.
No, fine. So can we all agree that approximation is certain, and we all agree on that? Absolutely. Right. In that case, we're going to see. I think we're going to have a break next month, so they give you all a chance to go to the sea and swim and go on boats and whatever you want to do. And we're going to see you after the summer, say in September. In that case, any of you want to write to me, I'll be very pleased to hear from you, etc., etc. And it was very, very enjoyable being with you again, etc. I really enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. And we're going to see you next time. So bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.